as NATO and Canada shake up U.S. trade. The U.S., the world's #1 trade power, is facing an unexpected challenge from Canada. While Washington remains entangled in complicated trade wars, Canada has made a bold move at the NATO and EU summit. Not about defense, but trade. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau sent a clear message. Canada is ready to compete directly with the US in Europe. Could this be the turning point that shifts the global economic balance? How will the US respond? Let's find out right now. Canada challenges the US, a bold strike when it comes to NATO's strategic trade. Partners, the US has always been the first choice. But now a familiar player, Canada, is quietly changing the game. Canada didn't just show up in Europe for diplomatic handshakes. They came to negotiate secure deals, and most importantly, compete directly with the US. Prime Minister Trudeau delivered a clear message. It's time for Europe to reduce reliance on American suppliers and consider other options. And who's that alternative? Canada. But why is Canada so confident it has laid out competitive advantages that even the US can't ignore? A modern manufacturing industry with advanced capabilities and high reliability, abundant stable energy resources, ready to replace US supplies when needed, a booming aerospace industry now becoming one of the most recognized in the world. At the heart of this strategy lies the comprehensive economic and trade agreement data between Canada and the EU. This isn't just any trade deal. It's a gateway for Canada to gain deeper access to European markets. If Canada succeeds in diverting even a portion of Europe's supply chains away from the US, it won't just be a financial blow. It will be a direct hit on Washington's global economic leadership. The impact on the US is Washington caught off guard. Imagine what happens if Europe begins cutting back on us. Imports, even a 5 to 10% shift of trade from the US to Canada, could cause billions of dollars in losses for the American economy every year. But it's not just about the numbers. This move could shake the very foundation of the US economic dominance, especially within NATO, where Washington has long been the leading force. And here's the alarming part. The US might not have seen this coming. Now, trade analysts are asking a critical question. Did Washington underestimate Canada's strategy? Faced with this threat, the US has two clear choices for increased trade incentives to keep European partners tied to the US. Exert economic pressure on Canada through tariffs or trade restrictions to halt their momentum. But both moves carry serious risks. A strong reaction could push Europe toward Canada even faster. Doing nothing, however, could mean the US slowly loses its influence in global trade markets. Canada's big play and Europe's response. This isn't just a test for Canada. It's a real power move. European nations are showing growing interest in Canada's proposal. Why so receptive? Diversifying supply chains has long been a priority for Europe, especially with ongoing US trade tensions. Canada offers reliable energy resources, emerging as a stable alternative as Europe looks to broaden its energy suppliers. Strengthening economic ties with Canada boosts Europe's bargaining power in negotiations with both Washington and Beijing. If this strategy succeeds, Canada will no longer be seen as just a dependent trading partner of the US. They could emerge as an independent global trade powerhouse with strong connections across the world's largest markets. This isn't just a bold step forward for Canada. It's a serious warning sign for the US. If Washington doesn't adjust its trade strategy soon, it could witness the slow erosion of the global economic dominance it has maintained for decades. Europe is shifting its energy strategy, its dependence on Russia. And the US has led these countries to face major risks in energy supply, especially with rising geopolitical tensions. But now, Europe is looking for new sources. And surprisingly, Canada, a neighbor to the US, is emerging as a promising choice. So why is Canada rising as such a strong contender? Europe seeks new energy sources. Canada is the optimal choice for many years. Europe has relied on natural gas from Russia to meet its massive energy demands. However, political crises such as the Crimea event and the Ukraine conflict have highlighted the risks inherent in this dependence. Moreover, while the US is an important supplier, the cost of LNG from the US is simply too high. And long-term contracts are not very flexible. Europe needs an alternative, a more stable energy source. And it's not hard to see that Canada, with its abundant resources and strategic location, could meet this need. So why has Canada become such an attractive choice? First, Canada has an abundant supply of natural gas, capable of providing long-term energy to Europe without fear of shortage. Second, Canada's strategic location helps reduce the cost of transporting LNG to European ports much quicker and more cost-efficient than shipping from the US. Not only that, with its clean natural gas projects, Canada can provide cleaner LNG, which is crucial for European countries pushing forward with their transition to renewable energy and reducing emissions. Canada threatens the US LNG empire. The L trade war is escalating when discussing Canada's competitive advantage. One key factor stands out: the much lower transportation costs for LNG compared to the US from ports on Canada's east coast. Natural gas can be shipped quickly and cost-effectively to Europe, while the US is a major LNG producer. Transportation costs from the Gulf Coast ports are higher combined with complex long-term contract regulations, making it difficult for the US to compete effectively in the long run. Canada, on the other hand, has the ability to offer more flexible contracts, allowing European countries to adjust supply based on demand, rather than being locked into rigid, multi-year agreements. To better understand Canada's growing role in the LNG industry, we can't ignore the major LNG projects currently underway. One standout project is LNG Canada in Quemont, British Columbia, with key players like Shell, Total Energies, and Petrona involved when it comes online in 2025. This project will have the capacity to provide up to 2 billion cubic feet of gas per day. An impressive figure that has the potential to change the global energy landscape. Additionally, Canada has other LNG projects in development in regions like Nova Scotia and Quebec, promising significant increases in the country's LNG export capacity. With Canada's rapid growth in the LNG sector, the US is now under major pressure. US LNG suppliers must rethink their strategies to maintain their market share in Europe. If not, they could lose billions of dollars in LNG export revenue. In fact, the US is already discussing the possibility of policy support like tax cuts or incentives for LNG exporters. But can the US maintain its position while Canada is rapidly growing and attracting attention from global nations? It's not just the US and Canada. Even countries like Russia and the Middle East are adjusting their strategies to maintain their influence. Canada is rising, drawing interest from Europe as well as major markets like Japan, South Korea, and India. So can Canada truly rise to become a global LNG superpower? And can the US adjust its strategy to face competition? From Canada, the answer will unfold in the near future. But for now, Canada is making strong and steady progress. What if the US president suddenly says that Canada could become the 51st state? How would you react? Is this just an unimportant statement? Or could it actually be a serious threat to the sovereignty of this neighboring country? Let's dive into how Canada is responding strongly to this, and how it could impact the economy of both the US and Canada. You do that for a state, but you don't do that for somebody else's country. So I think Canada is going to be a very serious contender to be our 51st me. Be clear, we will never be the 51st state. Canada rises a national wave, boycotting American goods in December 2024 during a meeting at Mar-a-Lago. Trump proposed that Canada could become the 51st state, saying Canada could join the US as two states, one conservative and one liberal. This wasn't just a joke. It was an action that deeply offended and threatened the sovereignty of Canada. Canadian leaders, including Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, immediately spoke out, stating that there was no chance of Canada joining the US. Trudeau's statement that there's no chance of Canada becoming a state of the US reflected a firm resolve to protect the country's independence. Canada responded strongly by launching campaigns to boycott American goods and tourism, One of the most visible acts of protest came from provinces like Quebec and Nova Scotia, which removed American-made alcohol from retail stores. This was a direct act of resistance against U.S. tariffs and showed Canada's firm stance in protecting its economy and sovereignty to work together. So we're going to continue to highlight that it is much better for us to work together. But if we're going to continually be facing threats of tariffs, or if we get actual tariffs, we will respond. Is the U.S.-Canada economic relationship at risk? Not only are the words significant, but Trump's tariff policies have also had a profound impact on the economy of both countries. But the bigger question lies behind these statements. Could the economic relationship between the U.S. and Canada be deeply affected when politics and economics intersect? These tensions could threaten the long-standing trade agreements both nations have built over many decades when President Trump implemented tariff measures, including a 25% tax on imports from Canada. Excluding energy, this led to the emergence of a boycott campaign against American goods. This move not only reflected discontent, but also had a direct impact on the U.S. economy. The tourism industry alone faced significant losses, with Canadian tourists to the U.S. dropping sharply, leading to decreased spending and job losses in tourist areas like Florida, California, and Texas, Canada. With more than 20 million tourists visiting the U.S. each year, has been a massive revenue source for the American tourism industry. But this boycott has caused the U.S. tourism industry to suffer greatly. If Canadians continue to limit their travel spending and purchases of American goods, the U.S. could lose billions of dollars annually from these activities. One prime example is the U.S. alcohol industry. Canadian provinces not only removed American-made alcohol from store shelves, but also called on their citizens to support domestic products instead of imports. The bourbon industry in states, like Kentucky, saw a major decline as their products were removed from Canadian shelves. Economic relationship between the U.S. and Canada now stands at a crucial crossroads. Political and economic tensions could change the trade and tourism landscape between these two countries. But can this relationship recover after these challenges? Could Canada really deliver a true shock to the North American electric vehicle industry? Canada's proposal to impose a 100% tariff on Tesla EVs is not just a simple trade response. It could be a turning point for the future of the electric vehicle industry. Let's dive in and explore how this move could impact Tesla and the global EV market. And we'll break down the economic consequences it could have for both the US and Canada. Canada responds to Trump imposes high tariffs on Tesla. First, let's take a look at the reasoning behind this decision from Canada. The NDP, although not the ruling party, holds significant influence in Parliament by calling for a 100% tariff on Tesla EVs. This move isn't just retaliation for US tax policies. It also carries a strategic goal, protecting the domestic EV industry and pushing for a transition to a clean economy. If this tariff is applied, the price of Tesla cars in Canada will skyrocket, making it more difficult for Canadians to own an electric vehicle. But it's not just about this tariff. Tesla, despite having factories in the US and China, still relies on parts imported from China. And if Trump decides to impose additional tariffs on these parts, Tesla will face a double challenge: tariffs from both sides, the US and Canada. This not only impacts product pricing, but could also slow down production and development in both countries, causing significant damage to the company and consumers alike. This move doesn't just affect Tesla. It will also have a major impact on the entire North American EV industry, with EV prices rising. Due to high tariffs, many consumers will reconsider their purchase decisions. In fact, as EV prices climb, the momentum for transitioning to electric vehicles, which is a key part of the US and Canada's CO2 reduction strategy, will slow down the EV industry, which has been strongly supported by government initiatives, could face setbacks in achieving environmental protection goals. The electric vehicle trade war implications for the US EV industry and the global economy. If this policy is implemented, it won't just impact Tesla, but all electric vehicle manufacturers, including Ford and General Motors in North America. Many companies depend on parts imported from China to produce electric vehicles if tariffs on these parts increase. These companies will face higher production costs, causing the price of electric vehicles to rise as well. But this doesn't just affect EV companies. The global supply chain, which is already complex and tight, interconnected, will face significant disruption. Suppliers of parts from China, South Korea, and Japan will be impacted, leading to rising costs for electronic components and other critical vehicle parts. If this trade war continues, we could see the North American EV industry struggle and even slow down the global transition to electric vehicles. However, this is the moment we need to think about the benefits of resolving conflict. If the US and Canada can find a reasonable solution to ease tensions, it won't just protect North American EV companies, but also promote the sustainable development of this industry. As the supply chain improves and the EV market grows, consumers will benefit from more affordable vehicle prices, and the transition to clean energy will accelerate. Resolving trade tensions is not only beneficial for EV companies, but it's an opportunity for North American countries to strengthen their position in the global market. By cooperating and reducing tariffs, we can speed up the adoption of electric vehicles and help the world transition to a greener economy, protecting the environment and creating new economic opportunities. So what do you think about this situation? Can the US and Canada find a reasonable solution to ease tensions and continue developing the EV industry? Or will we witness a breakdown in the global supply chain? Right in front of us is a trade war that could change the fate of not just the US, but the entire North American economy. Will Trump's move to impose a 50% tariff on steel and aluminum truly benefit the US? Or is it a double-edged sword, causing both countries to pay the price? Unverified information suggests the Trump administration is considering a 50% tariff on steel and aluminum imports from Canada. But this tariff hasn't been officially announced yet. And if this tariff is imposed, how will these impacts affect you and the global economy? Trump imposes 50% tariff on steel and aluminum. Why could the US face challenges? Did you know the tariffs the US is imposing on steel and aluminum from Canada aren't a first-time move? In fact, back in 2018, the US government imposed a 25% tariff on steel and a 10% tariff on aluminum. What happened then? The US faced 75,000 job losses in its own industries. So what's going to happen this time? According to experts, these new tariffs could drive up costs for us. Industry steel and aluminum manufacturers in the US will face challenges as the price of raw materials rises. This not only increases the cost of production, but it could also drive up manufacturing costs in other industries, like Automotive Airlines and construction. But it's not just steel and aluminum. This move has a far-reaching impact on the energy and food sectors. In the US, Canada is the second largest supplier of oil to the US. If this oil supply is affected, we could see gas prices skyrocket, hitting American wallets hard. This would increase transportation and living costs for millions of families. Let's not forget, Canada is also a major food exporter to the US, especially beef, pork, and dairy. A disruption in the food supply chain could lead to shortages, pushing food prices higher and making life harder for consumers. So is this a smart move or a poor decision that could lead the US into unforeseen consequences? Trudeau warns us, Canada prepares for strong retaliation. Prime Minister Trudeau has made it clear that Canada will protect its citizens' jobs and domestic industries. He's issued a strong warning if the US continues to impose tariffs. Canada will not stay silent and is ready to retaliate with powerful counter-tariffs. It's not just the Prime Minister. Many Canadian politicians have also spoken out firmly. Bill Blair, Canada's Minister of Defence, has stated that Canada is always ready to protect its sovereignty and national interests. This shows that Canada is not just defending its steel and aluminum industries, but is ready to stand up against UN fair trade policies. Remember, the steel and aluminum industries are not just important to the government. They're an essential part of Canada's economy. Many Canadian businesses depend on these markets. Any disruption could lead to the collapse of supply chains, affecting thousands of workers' jobs. Canada has already developed a strategy to not only protect its national interests, but also reduce reliance on the U.S. The Canadian government has been strengthening trade relationships with other countries, such as Europe, Asia, and Latin America, to protect its economy and minimize the impact of trade disputes with the U.S. If this standoff isn't resolved, North America could face a full economic crisis. Production costs will soar, food and energy prices will rise, and many industries will face significant challenges. So what do you think about the future of US-Canada trade relations? Is this the time for both nations to come to the table and negotiate to avoid an unnecessary trade? Or could this disrupt the North American economy? Please like and subscribe. It will help us tremendously. Thank you.